and welcome to the podcast, Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. My name is Ben, and this is...
Jim. It's Jim right here, ready to totally recall what happened.
So much deja vu. Did we watch the same movie twice? This is crazy.
The movie's so nice, they made it twice.
That is not the sentence they said for this movie. So, Jim, you picked the movie this week, and you went for like a new curveball for us of directly going straight to the remake after we watched the original.
Yeah, look, and I feel like, I don't know, do I need to justify my response? Like,
you don't have to justify anything to anyone ever, and that's the beauty of democracy.
Here's the thing. I have a soft spot for 2012's Total Recall. There's a few things about it that I just really like, and
can we play a game where I guess what those things are?
Maybe. Look, but it's a movie where I also freely admit that every time I watch it, and this time was no different, I go in super excited, right? And I always leave the credits disappointed. Do you know what I mean? It's literally just like every time. And it gets to the point where I'm just like, look, Jim, why do you do this to yourself? Why do you do this? And then I'm just like, but trust me, in 12 months, I'll be back, and I'll be like, remember those few things you liked? You like them a lot, and you should give this another go.
Everything about this movie on paper screams, this is a Jim movie.
Yeah.
Like everything. Like, hang on, let me run down the stats. Ready? Released 3rd of August, 2012. Directed by Len Wiseman, which is reason number one you like this movie. For those of you who don't know Jim loves Underworld.
I have a soft spot for Underworld. And look, Underworld is Len Wiseman's baby, and that was how he, became known to us as a film director, and look, we could talk forever about
I'm going to burn a fact early on. Do you know how Len Wiseman got his start in cinema?
I thought he was a production assistant.
Props and miniatures.
Yeah, so he was I've heard, because I've nerd alert in case you weren't sure. I've watched every audio commentary Len Wiseman's ever done, right? So and he tells stories of like just things that I just think are like classic, Hollywood stories where like, he was the guy in the sci-fi movie that was behind the supposedly automatic door, like pulling it open and shut, as people walked through it, and doing all that.
He worked on one of my favorite sci-fi properties of all time, which is the Stargate TV show.
Yeah, wow. So see, Len Wiseman, how do we not have a soft spot for good old Len? But
right.
Keep statting me.
Continuing. Screenplay by Kurt Wimmer and Mark Bombach, based on the original Total Recall, and We Can Remember It For You Wholesale by Philip K. Dick. Coincidentally, this film does not credit Philip K. Dick.
Look, I have a fact for you.
Yes.
Do you know what Kurt Wimmer also wrote?
I don't.
Have you heard of a little film called Equilibrium with Christian Bale?
Another Jim movie.
Oh, I love Equilibrium so much.
Hashtag not a great movie.
Didn't say it was, just said I love it.
You made me watch that movie before we had a podcast.
So yeah, Kurt Wimmer wrote Equilibrium. He also wrote and directed a movie that is, look, and this sounds terrible to say in a public forum, but so bad that it must really be witnessed to be believed, which was called Ultraviolet with Mila Jovovich, right? So anyway, so look, this is where Kurt Wimmer's from. Now, I'm not dissing Kurt Wimmer. I actually think he probably did a fine job on this screenplay ultimately. But keep statting me.
Starring Colin Farrell, Kate Beckinsale, who is, in my opinion, the best thing in this movie, Jessica Biel, Bryan Cranston, John Cho, and Bill Nye. Not the science guy. Cinematography, Paul Cameron. Music by Harry Gregson Williams, and additional music by Hybrid. Not for this podcast, went down a strange rabbit hole of Hybrid recently. Because I'm like, who's Hybrid? They've done so much stuff in cinema and TV. Budget of 125 million, opening 25 million, domestic 58 million, international 139 million, which brings us to a worldwide box office of 198 million.
Yeah.
This movie underachieved.
Yeah, it's in that interesting category where, you know, it's not low enough to say, oh, it's a flop, it was a box office disaster, but it's also below what we would assume is the break-even point for the film.
It's almost strangely worse.
So yeah, which is sort of like, it's that nearly, you know, like
almost got it.
Yeah, but it's I missed it by that much, you know. But look, can we get in? Can we get in here?
Okay. I want to give you my initial impressions of the film.
Wait, you were going to tell me why you thought I keep coming back to the well for this movie.
The first one is the director, because you just have such a soft spot for him. The second is for an exact almost 15 to 16 seconds of film, which is the first fight in this film. Which is like this kind of like roller coaster, single shot, fake shot of a fight that, interesting stat, took 22 takes to make, and Colin Farrell did all of them. No stuntman for him.
It's amazing, Ben.
It is really cool. It is legitimately such a diamond in the rest of what is a rather, I feel bad for saying it, it's almost more insulting, bland movie.
Yeah, it's tough. There's a few other things I like about it. I think you're right in that Kate Beckinsale's awesome in this. Beckinsale is awesome in this movie. She's
a way better option than the kind of they've combined two characters from the original film into this one.
I was gonna say to you, and this was one of the reasons that it's so interesting to watch back to back, because I think the choice, and there's a few choices that I actually think are way better, and this is one of them, is the idea of taking Michael Ironside and Sharon Stone, making him a composite character that is just like, you know, a lady Terminator of death.
Works 100% better.
It's super cool, and she does a really good job in the part too. But carry on.
No. That was kind of like, I was just going to say, like, the combination of that character, I think, is such a brilliant choice. Because really, if you think about the first film, they're kind of like hedging their bets, right? They're like, oh, we want Sharon Stone because she's really good looking, and we're going to make her actiony, which is kind of weird, not common for this era of film. But we do need a credible threat, so we'll have Michael Ironside. But in this, you've got the one character, and I think it's a scarier character, and I think it's a more effective character.
Yeah, and I think it does work quite well. Look, I also the other things I like about it, and the things that I will remember in 12 months' time, which will cause me to watch this movie again, are things like, I'm a real sucker for the general production design of this kind of film. This film, you know, really is like if you took Minority Report.
Yes.
Steven Spielberg's Minority Report, you know, and Blade Runner, and you merged them together into a visual style, you get Total Recall. Then what you do is you take those two films, and then you put a little Michael Bay, J.J. Abrams anamorphic lens flare sauce all over the top of your meal of a film, and Total Recall is what, you know, they call that menu item, you know.
The cinematographer, Paul Cameron, did Collateral and Gone in 60 Seconds as well. So like that visual flair, that visual language in this film has pedigree in other films that look amazing. Like,
and look, it's a good looking film. Like, you know, you keep looking at it like, and I love that. Look, it was very popular right around this time, 2012, right? So that J.J. Abrams had just been really pushing this aesthetic of lens flares all the time, you know, literally getting torches, having them just out of frame and shining them into the camera lens to make them flare, like, you know, and he just doing that, and then this is coming right on the back of that. And look, I'm a sucker for that look. I think it's a really cool cinematic look. Like, yes, you can argue that it's overdone and some people find it distracting. I don't, and I just think it adds a real nice look to the frame, particularly in an action film. I think there's something about an action film and anamorphic lens flares that just go together, you know. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, if you are someone who's like, what is he on about, when
It's a
you
series of
shine
books from when we were teenagers, and they slowly get into animals.
No, that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So
It's
a lens
animorphs.
flare is a an artifact, if you like. It's actually usually an undesirable artifact that you get when you shine a bright light source down the lens of a camera, you know, and it causes this flare look to actually go across the image and create light leaks and a very interesting image. Now, it can, of course, be very distracting to the main action of the film, but I don't know. In this case, they used it a lot. I like it. I like it as an aesthetic anyway.
It really got its boom in car ads. Like the whole lens flare, spike of light into the frame, cars
Well,
coming in, Transformers then with Michael Bay.
it's really Michael Bay has been, you know, like it's funny. It's if you want to look at the history of lens flares, you know, particularly anamorphic ones, like, you know, it really sort of started in the late 80s with Tony Scott, you know, who was getting into he was actually looking at inspiration for his filmmaking from music videos, you know,
Yeah.
and music videos doing experimental editing techniques and playing with flares a lot, you know. And of course, if you go right back, you know, occasionally in sort of our old westerns, you know, way back in the day, you would get flares. But what's interesting is they were usually an unwanted effect, you know,
Because of their
whereas
environment of filming.
well, exactly, and it's just like literally
Yeah.
like if we shined a bright light source into the camera and we got this flare. Oh, that doesn't look great, but hey, we're, you know, it's the 70s, so that's what we're living with, and we're not going to reshoot it, you know.
Film's
So
expensive.
exactly. So, but then it sort of becomes, you know, part of the remembered visual language, and then guys like Tony Scott, and then later, a few years later, Michael Bay start kind of weaponizing it and actually going after it as a visual aesthetic and putting it right into their movies. You know, Michael Bay right through the 90s kind of brought it into action cinema, and then that trend, it almost sort of, you know, it filtered through to other movies for a while, and then it came back and it was just Bay who was still doing it because he always did. And then J.J. Abrams hit with his 2006 Mission Impossible 3, and it is a flare-orama, right? J.J. Abrams was just like, I'm all about the flares, like, you know, and
Is that
for
the
a
one that's in
while,
Australia?
no, that's Mission Impossible 2. But
Right.
you know, so J.J. Abrams does flares and then moves into Star Trek and flares it up like crazy, and then that's right when Total Recall hits.
Yeah.
So there
Lens
you go.
flares in space is wild.
The 4 minute history of lens flares. So, but look, I love lens flares, and look, I love Blade Runner, and I love Minority Report. So having a visual look where half the movie looks like Blade Runner and the other half looks like Minority Report, like, is probably going to be something I'll enjoy. But the problem is, it doesn't really look like Total Recall. It looks like a copy of Blade Runner followed by a copy of Minority Report.
So yeah, so this movie, the plot, it's like they went out of their way to change things that were good and kept things that were ho-hum general, right? So the general plot is the same. And I was reading articles about the lead up to the release of this movie and saying how, like, oh, we're actually sticking much closer to the source material. Complete hoo-ha.
Yes.
They just do the first movie, but they take the cool setting out of it and add a different, all right setting. But hey, let me finish.
Yeah.
So we start off with a guy who's living in a dystopian Earth. There's been a mass chemical warfare event where pretty much only 2 parts of the world are habitable still. That is an extended area of Great Britain and what is effectively Australia that they call the colonies, which I am offended by. We are a country. We are no longer a colony. Anyway, and you've created this kind of 2-class system. You've got like the kind of the haves, which are the Great Britons, and then the workers and the have-nots, which are the colonies. And you've got this character, Quaid again, who's like, I'm not happy with my life. I would love it if I had some more excitement. And he finds recall, just like in the first film, and he's told not to go, just like in the first film, because, you know, they'll lobotomize you. And wouldn't you know it, he has repressed memories, or does he? And yeah, it kicks off this whole, he was a spy, he was part of the resistance. It has the same kind of twist in it, in that, oh no, he was originally sent there and to be a mole, but he fell in love and agrees with the resistance. And you get this whole kind of ending where, he's, the mechanism for the showdown's different. It's not an atmosphere on a different planet. It's a shutdown code for robots that never comes back into play, mind you. They never use that.
Well, they say it was a lie.
Yeah, it was the whole, like,
that was a red herring.
Yeah, it was him being used to get deeper into the network or whatever, or to meet up with the resistance leader. And then, there's a showdown on their way back to the colonies because there's a conspiracy to take them over with a robot army. They take the Mars out of it, they take the soul out of it, and they take the weirdness out of it. And it makes just such a worse movie, in my opinion.
What's interesting about this to me is that I look at, just from a script perspective and script and plotting, the original Total Recall from 1990, and then I look at Total Recall from 2020. On paper, and when you actually look at what is happening, the logic of the films, the 2020 version should be better.
It's tighter.
Because it's a lot tighter, right? They actually, they patch up the plot holes. They've done what so many remakes don't bother to do, which is actually go, what's a better version of this? What's everything that doesn't make sense in the original? And can we do a version of it that does make sense? Now, all of that should lead to a better movie, right? And that's the other thing I find so fascinating about it. I look at it and I go, this makes more sense. It's more cohesive. It's more coherent. We're not sort of introducing the main action of the plot in the third act, for the first time, the way we are doing in 1991. It's way more consistent, but it also, as you say, it's impossible to say that it doesn't have it doesn't have the life in it that the 1990 version had, and
last time we talked about depth, right? So like a viewing audience, 3 different people could view it and get 3 different things out of that. This doesn't have that. This is a one single viewing audience action movie.
Yeah. And it's also like, it's interesting. It follows a bit of a trend in modern cinema, and particularly modern big budget television, where it's almost kind of like they're very afraid of giving any of the characters flaws, particularly the heroes. Like they're sort of terrified to give them flaws, or do anything that might actually make them perhaps a little bit unique or a little bit different. And it does just strip all the heart out, and it makes it, there's no oddness here. There's no, there's no unusual characters. There's not really any humor, beyond some kind of standard action movie quips that actually aren't actually funny. It's more, it's the kind of thing where it's like the line delivery tells you that there's a laugh there, or that's supposed to be witty. The delivery clearly understands that is supposed to be a witty moment. It's
almost like the moment the comedian waits for the laugh.
But, exactly. And then you look at what's actually been said and you're like, yeah, but that's not anything. Like, that's not actually, but like, it's not only that. I have the other things that are interesting about this film, and it's kind of like, much as I say, look, I love Len Wiseman, it'd probably be better to say I've got a soft spot for Len Wiseman, right? Because there are a lot of things in this movie where you would probably, unfortunately, point to the direction not matching the script. A really good example of that is you described the colony as the have-nots, right? And in fact, Colin Farrell's character, Quaid, spends, basically the first third of the movie whinging, right? So that, oh, is this all my life's going to be,
He's trying to
and
get
the
a
fact
promotion and he
he's
can't get a
trying to get a
promotion.
promotion, can't get, oh, poor guy, can't get a promotion. Let's have a look at his circumstance, right? His apartment is gigantic, okay? It's huge. I don't know, if this is the have-nots, right? And where everything's not so good and gee, I wish we could be not in the colony. I'm like, why? You are in a beautiful sci-fi apartment that's bigger than, three-quarters of our normal luxury modern day apartment. It has all the modern conveniences. You have now look, sure, we find out that this is, she's a plant, right? But you have a beautiful wife who loves you, and also has a good job as an EMT, right? Yes, your job, you are in this assembly line job. That's probably the one thing that you could point to and say, my life, what's going on? But actually, you got a best friend who's pretty cool, and you head down to the local bar. Like, I'm not seeing much hardship, truth be told. Like, that's the thing. I look at his life as presented in the movie. I look at what he has. I look at his environment, and I'm like, I can't see much hardship here. Yet you spend the first third of the movie complaining about how bad everything is.
The first film, it was more of he was a daydreamer, right? He was
Yes.
dreaming of something that he wanted to go on an adventure.
I
He
want
wanted
to
to
go
go to
to
Mars.
Mars. I want to
Whereas
go
this guy,
there.
it's almost like they're presenting it as if he's trying to escape
Yeah.
what he's currently in.
And
But you're right,
also
it's not
just
that bad.
it's not that bad. And also, I don't know, he also is so depressed and upset and doesn't have anything. He manages to find time to seemingly work out 24/7 because he's ripped to shreds.
Yeah.
So I'm like,
He's
what?
only been memory wiped for 3 weeks.
But again, like, this is the thing. Like, I'm just sort of like, this character who is supposed to be discontent. I'm like, sure, in the script we can say I'm not content, but we look at all of what we'd call the directorial choices, which is, the look of the apartment, the size of it, the fact that, oh, hey, go work out before this movie. It's an action movie. And also we're going to show you with your shirt off in those early sections when we're saying how, hard up we are. Like, all these, they just don't match. Like, the script saying how working class and hard done by he is doesn't match what we're actually seeing on screen, which, what does that leave you with? Well, it leaves you with, gee, this guy's kind of a whiner. He's a bit of a whinger. Like, that's real likable. In a protagonist.
And Colin Farrell is such a likable actor too, and you're just like, man, they had to go to some effort.
Yeah, that's the only thing that really sort of he sort of keeps it together, with his charisma. So, but look, that was just like one thing that I don't love. Like, the other thing is, like, it's odd because not Hauser, sorry, what's his name? Cohagen. I still remember, and I can't credit this because I can't remember where it was from, but it wasn't me. I was reading a review back in the day when this movie came out, and this line stuck with me. And every time I watch the movie, I'm like, this guy, he got it. He got it. He's bang on. He's right. And he's like, watching the finale of 2012's Total Recall is kind of like watching someone beat up their dad. Like,
well, why can't we get Bryan Cranston a cool role in cinema?
Yeah, I don't know. We can't.
There's been some well-acted roles, but like he's in that Godzilla, and it's not a great role. He's in a few other things, a few little indie things, and you're just like, it's a waste of Bryan Cranston.
Yeah. And when he's on screen, he does his best to sell this thing.
Working.
Do you know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I'm like, Colin Farrell's 36. You look about 60.
You're 11.
And you're trying to have a knife fight with each other.
They try and make him look cool by giving him like a vest.
Yeah.
Like
and they say he's ex-military. Yeah. And I'm like, sure. It's not working. Okay. It's not working for us here. So, but look, I've hogged a lot of time there because I have a lot to say.
I just want to talk about Jessica Biel's character. The one thing they nailed bringing across from the first film to the second film is how unimportant she is. Poor Melina, like, wow. Yeah. Just like authentic. Like, I feel through no fault of her own, she got nominated for a Razzie for this film.
I'm not surprised because, Like again, and we should say, I've seen Jessica Biel be great in certain roles,
If she
but
had the
not
vibes from Blade 3,
not yeah, exactly. Like even that, but like but yeah, but just for whatever reason, not this one. That
she's a
character,
character that exists solely to further another character's agenda. She
yeah,
has no agency of her own,
yeah,
so she is bland. She is cardboard cutout. Even when they set her up to be kind of like uh awesome fighting chick versus awesome fighting chick, you're just like, I hope the other chick wins. Like, she is superfluous except for a mechanism that I don't think even works as well in this as it does the previous movie, and that character in the previous movie was the same. It's really unfortunate.
yeah. It is unfortunate, and look, the character doesn't work. You know, it's a non-playable character in a video game who's along for the ride
It's a
with
quest
the
giver.
with the protagonist, you know, and it's unfortunate. And look, the Bill Nye of it all is unfortunate as well. Can we just talk about accents for a second? Okay,
Oh,
because I've got accent issues with this movie. Okay, let me just like, okay, I'd forgotten.
I want to preface this. You
Okay,
lived in the UK for quite a long time. I have visited the UK multiple times. There is a diverse plethora of accents in that environment.
but
Continue. No.
that's true, but
Yeah.
that's not even what I'm going to talk about.
Oh,
What I'd forgotten which actors were doing what accent in this movie, right? Until I rewatched it this time. And I was looking hard for a story world logic to why they decided to play it the way they did. And you almost get there. I got so close. So here's the deal, right? So we have Kate Beckinsale, English. We
yeah.
have Colin Farrell. It's in real life. We have Colin Farrell, Irish.
Yeah.
Okay. And we've got Jessica Biel, American. Okay. And all three of those characters are playing American accents. Now, Kate Beckinsale, once she turns evil,
Switches.
she switches to her native accent, her English accent. Okay. Okay. Now you think to yourself, why did they do this? And then you go, okay, no, I get it. Okay. The haves, right? The people with all of the power and the bad guys are the British. They're on the British side of the world. And so it kind of makes sense that Kate Beckinsale has a British accent, whereas Colin Farrell and Jessica Biel, they're the Americans, they're the good guys. This is backed up further when you meet Bill Nighy's character, who English in real life, but playing American, okay? And playing it very definitely the way that one does, and this is not a criticism of him, but he has such a distinctive voice, and when he plays that accent very well, but it's so deliberate as to be perfect, you know, on a technical level, which sort of strips some of his natural cadence and the heart out of it, but that's by the by. So this all works, this internal logic all works. Enter Cohagen, the main bad guy, and whatever internal logic you wanted to apply to who's doing what accent and where they're from completely falls apart, because he is the big bad, he's from Great Britain, and he's got an American accent. Now, I'm just saying, if that initial logic that I set up was not intended to be the logic of the film, then why is anybody doing an accent that's not their native accent? We know Colin Farrell is Irish.
Yep.
We know Bill Nighy is English. We know Kate Beckinsale is English, okay? And then, how deep is her role? How important is it for her as a spy and a mole to be actually changing the accent she's living with on a daily basis? Why can't you just program the memories of Colin Farrell to be like, hey, my wife's English, right? You know, and then because there's no way she doesn't slip up. Like, I'm sorry, you're living this role for weeks and weeks at a time, and you unnecessarily give yourself as a spy a character of an American accent, like completely not what. Are you with me? Are you
I'm with
me?
you. I want to also point out that if we're staying true to how their accents should be, they should have a bunch of Australian accents.
Yeah, which is not even like, you know, and look, yeah, if we
and I get it, right? The population of the world in this movie has been condensed into a small space. It should be multicultural, it should be multilingual, it should be a hodgepodge of cultures. You could have American, you could have English, you could have Irish, you could have Chinese, Japanese, Scottish, everything in there. But yeah, they make the good guys American, and then all but one of the bad guys British.
Yeah. And I'm just like, and that's where I'm just like, oh, your internal logic. It's so close.
To be fair, you want an internal logic from the underworld guy.
Yeah, it's true. So
it's not his jam. It's not his specialty.
But like, okay, so look, ultimately there's an unsatisfying experience as a whole here, but there's still sequences I like. I like the chase sequence, the first chase sequence.
The car one? Or the one where he's running through the buildings?
The rooftop running sequence.
That's good.
There's a shot that I just love, and I've always loved, of when he's escaping from his apartment and the camera follows him and he does this slide along the floor and goes out this tiny window.
How many holes in the floors of apartments are there in this world, by the way?
Many, right? You know, because Kate Beckinsale's got to crash through a roof at some point and do a cool superhero landing.
Down for what?
Super important, Ben, that we get that in the film.
We've talked about this film and how it is a lesser version of the first film. I enjoyed watching it.
And I'm the same. Like I said, I'm going to be back for more in 12 months.
I'm not a once every 12 month guy, for sure. This is probably a one and done, or a 1.5 and done. I kind of went back and watched some things. But it is, why it's watchable, ultimately, is as we said before, a tighter experience. You aren't left to think for too long while watching it. There are no moments you're left to ponder. There's no slowdown for you to catch up and actually think, why am I watching this? It's quick, it's frenetic, it's fast, and it just keeps moving. And the first one doesn't do that at all. There are points where it kind of just goes, oh. The only slowdown in this movie is the apartment, and that is exposition time. Yeah. The only real big piece of exposition time in this film. There are little bits elsewhere. I liked the mechanism of the reveal of the video. Yeah. The piano, I thought that was kind of creative and fun. Like, you find the key. Yeah, it's what it is it's just an almost there.
Yeah. And you know what I always think when I watch this movie? I'm like, who would love this movie? And then I think, if you were 12 and hadn't seen a lot of cinema yet, you know, you'd watched a few movies here and there, but you hadn't really watched heaps of movies and you didn't have much of a body of cinematic language, and you watched this, I think it'd blow your mind. I think you'd love it. You know what I mean? Like, but of course, the big issue is there's so much that we've seen before and it's just been remixed in different ways that it's so familiar. But imagine if you weren't that familiar, you know, with...
It has some nice peripheral sci-fi, like the fall. The elevator through the earth is fun. It's dumb. It's super duper dumb. Like, not even an ounce of possibility in this thing, right? It would be more possible to have one that looped over the outside of the earth. But fun. And lends itself to, it's kind of Chekhov's fall. Like, it lends itself to a fantastic set piece payoff at the end with a big explosion. The cars, I don't like. I don't like the magnet car. I always think it's a weird cop-out in sci-fi, the magnet car. I don't know why. It's just not my jam.
Well, it's that one's a tricky one because that one's a direct lift from Spielberg's Minority Report,
it is.
But it's done worse here. So that's sort of like, that's always a shame, you know.
And you know, like the little tweaks, like the disguise. You know, they pull through the disguise from this one to this one, but it's a hologram disguise this time. It's a collar that they mix the two technologies, the hologram wrist thing and the disguise. And I think that's really cool. I think it's stupid the way they brought it back at the end. They should have just ended the film without the final twist. So the final twist in this film is he's in the ambulance, everything's okay, they've defeated the bad guys. But no, Kate Beckinsale's got the hologram thing and pretending to be Jessica Biel. And you're like, just real unnecessary, adds no real excite. They're trying to add an exciting pop to the end. It doesn't. The movie's over. But yeah, like there are things in this movie that they've tried to kind of, they put thought into it. There was hard work put into this film. And that's the thing I think I try to remember a lot. Like, when I was younger, I loved ripping on films. Loved it. Loved it with a passion. But I find it harder to do now.
There's so much craft on display here. And look, honestly, that's half the reason I keep coming back. Like, you know, there's so many cool ideas and sci-fi riffs that we're seeing. Like, even just stuff like in that sequence where they do the one shot, which is super cool, right? Where he's taken out all the guys at recall. This just before that, or actually I think it's just after, they have this, you know, let's throw kind of a grenade thing, it's going to explode and it's going to fracture into all these video cameras, and then we're going to, you know, one soldier is going to go up to the back of the soldier in front of him, pull down a panel, and it's like a little computer backpack, and I'm just like, whoa, idea. I love watching that. Now you think about it for 2 seconds and it's the most illogical thing ever for soldiers, but it's visually very cool, you know.
It's a hark back to the soldier who carried the radio on his back in World War II. It's kind of calling back to that image of, let's call HQ or let's look inside there. Yeah, you're right. It's that kind of familiar image teched up to the sci-fi angle. And yeah, you think about it for 2 secs. In a breach situation where you are moving fast like SWAT, makes no sense. Put a little camera under the door.
Yeah. But again, like it's kind of ideas like that. That's just one example, but they are all the way through the movie, and they're super cool. There's a lot of craft. There's a lot of awesome prop work and set design, and you know, just
the
fun
phones.
sci-fi stuff.
The phones are really cool. So like super the phones are in the hand, and then they like put it on the glass, and they put it on the glass, and it puts a video on any glass surface. Rad idea. Talking about some rad ideas, I got some facts from this film. This film has a reference to a film we've done in this podcast before, other than the original Total Recall. Do you know what it is? The book he's reading on his way in the elevator.
I was say it's the book, but I can't remember what the book is. Wait,
Ian Fleming's The Spy Who Loved Me.
Of course, yeah.
So I mean, in the movie, they're referencing the whole he's a spy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a wonderful little kind of thing to what we did. You mentioned there is a director's cut of this film. It adds about 9 minutes. One of the things it adds is super confusing, and I get why it's not in the film.
Yeah.
And that is Ethan Hawke.
Yes.
So, unlike the first film, it's not just that he had his memories wiped. In the director's cut, he had his complete face and look changed, and he originally looked like Ethan Hawke. So in the video at the piano, it's Ethan Hawke giving the monologue of, you're an undercover agent, you actually sided with the resistance, you got to get the shutdown code in there, blah, 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 blah. He gives that exposition. It's sort of like a 5-minute monologue of a cameo. And I actually kind of like it.
Yeah.
I think it's the better version. I get why it's not the popular version.
It's another one of those things that that they did to patch gaps in the plot. So it makes a lot more sense because Hauser is known in the intelligence community to look a certain way, you know, and so by doing the sort of, if you want to call it the plastic surgery, you know, option where they change the look of his face, you know, it actually gives a reason as to why he's not recognized, you know, as an agent, and they sort of give the whole thing away. But as you say, I also completely understand why it was cut, because it's a level of complexity too far for an audience. You can
especially for this film.
You can still see vestiges of it though, because when he actually, you know, delivers the first video message to himself from the bank vault, you know, he's in a surgical gown, and he's you know, obviously being,
he's about to be face-offed.
Exactly, he's about to get face-offed. So so it's kind of like, cool. Like that's obviously a vestige to that still being there. But and I also just love Ethan Hawke. So the fact that it was like, oh hey, Ethan
He's good
Hawke was
squishy.
almost in this movie, but
well, it's even like a
yeah.
double. It's a double switch in the extended scene. So he starts up the video, and it's kind of like a no-name guy, and he's going, "Hey man, like we've got to talk. I'm you," and then he takes the collar off, and the hologram comes down, and it's Ethan Hawke as Hauser. The second major change in the extended cut or director's cut is the ending, and it is a very small change. So at the end of the film, in the same as the first film, there's that whole thing of like, he questions his reality. And he's like, is this a dream? In the director's cut, he also looks at his arm where he got the peace stamp from Recall, and the stamp isn't there. So it's almost a more definitive answer, because like in the movie, the resistance leader is like, hey, the only reality that matters is the reality you accept, is kind of what he's saying, right? And at the end of the film, in the director's cut, it's more clear that he's making a decision to accept the reality he has, whether that's real or not. Because he looks at the stamp, it's not there. He makes the connection of that I'm probably in a memory. I'm okay with that because I have Jessica Biel.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like a more definitive answer than the first film gave us of whether they think it's real or not.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I think,
and I get why they took it out.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't need it. So but look, ultimately, like, yeah, look, I like this movie. I just could never, defend it and in the sense and saying it's amazing, you should watch it. Do you know what I mean? It is just something where it's got these few things that I really like, and I will keep coming back every now and again and revisiting, my friend Total Recall from 2012, and I'll be like, maybe.
It's a movie. I watch this and Mission Impossible and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings every year.
Pretty much. So what
overall,
can you do for me? What you got for me next?
You ready to move on? You ready to go? You ready to?
I'm done.
You ready to kick it out?
I recalled twice, Ben. I recall.
All right, I want to double check one thing. Give me 2 seconds.
Okay.
Because I know the movie I want to watch, but the exact title has literally just slipped out of my brain. This is Behind the Curtain.
It must be a good one if it's so good that the title of the film that he wants to watch has slipped out of his brain. I wouldn't be surprised.
No, I got it. I was thinking of the sequel. I'm talking about the original.
All right.
This is a movie
so this is what we're doing next week now.
This is what we're watching next week.
All right.
I watched this movie as a child. Pretty sure you watched this movie as a child. This movie caused me to be kicked in the head by my cousin more than any other movie ever released.
Oh, no. I know what we're watching.
All right. I don't think you do.
Really? Okay.
This movie stars 3 children who are taught kung fu / karate by their grandfather, and they fight adults throughout the whole movie. This movie is 3 ninjas.
We're not. Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Oh, were you really going to say 3 ninjas?
I was going to say. To be fair, I was going to say, are we watching 3 ninjas kick back?
No, original 3 ninjas.
Okay, but seriously, so I was close. I was literally like, I was literally going to say kick back.
So back in the day, video shops, VCRs, tapes, I maybe hired this movie 3 months straight every weekend.
Wow.
I was obsessed with this movie as a kid. I don't remember anything about it except their names, which were Colt, Rocky, and Tum Tum.
Great. Do you know what I know about this movie?
What?
I don't really like it.
That makes me so happy, Jim. It like brightens my soul.
I'm a little bit sad now. Like what? I got 7 days. I have to watch 3 ninjas. I have to. Work.
That's the whole premise of this podcast.
It's
a podcast where we watch movies and inflict them upon each other, Jim.
Well,
it's what we do.
Class me inflicted, like.
So as we wrap up and Jim sits in his disappointment, places you can find us. We release this podcast on Spotify and iTunes. You can find us by looking up Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. We also release this every week on YouTube, Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. And you can also find us on Instagram if you look up Jim and Ben's Adventures.
You think there's
Please.
anyone who like watches us on YouTube, then listens on Spotify, then goes over to Apple and listens again, and is just like, you know, just getting
I really
the
hope not,
stats
because
up?
I know not even my parents would do that. They love me.
Sorry, I interrupted your flow with the random thought.
No, Flo. Leave us a review, leave us a message, leave us a comment. Let us know movies you'd like us to watch. Hey, they could be movies you know we'll hate. If it makes sense for the podcast, one of us might pick it. But yeah, we'd really love to hear from you, because I mean, we know some people are listening. We know it's not a lot. But if you think a friend would like it, share it with them, leave a review. Do all those things that let other people know we exist if you like us. Thank you for listening to the podcast this week. I've been Ben.
And I am Jim, and I will see you for 3 ninjas.
Yeah! You're Tum Tum.
Bye.